In this video, we're going to go over an exercise that practices the rules for APA in-text citation. And this Word document that I'm looking at, which is the exercises, you can find that on this channel. If you go to the description of the video, you'll be able to download it if you want to do that first, and then you can check your answers along with me. So unless you are an APA guru or APA plays a daily role in your life, again, the goal for learning APA is to know how to look up the rules and then apply them once you find them. So the information in this sheet, it's not looking for you to know these answers off the top of your head necessarily, although some of the easier ones that are applied more frequently to essays in school probably would be useful to learn. However, a lot of these are based on things that you would then say, I need to do this, I need to go look it up, either in the APA Manual of Style or a guide. There's lots of free resources out there so that you can find the rule and apply it. I have a quick guide that I've put together that has most of the more commonly used rules for undergraduate writers, and I have that listed as a link also in the description here. So if you're wondering where I'm pulling my information from, it is the APA Manual of Style, but I have put it together as notes in this PowerPoint that's also available. So let's get started. So question number 1, what are 2 pieces of information always required in an APA in-text citation? And this is one of the things you should really learn because it's going to be used all the time when you're writing papers, and that is that you are going to need the author's last name and the year of publication. So those are the 2 things you'll always need. Doesn't matter if you are creating an in-text citation for a website, for a book, for an article, it's always going to be those 2 things. And then there may be more things needed, but those are the 2 minimum. So once you have your APA in-text citation ready, you've got the author's last name, or if there's multiple authors, you've got their last names, and you've got the year of publication. Where do you put those in-text citations? So question number 2, there are 3 places in a sentence that you can put an APA in-text citation, and where are those? And again, if you're not sure, you would want to go and look this up. The most popular one, of course, is the end of the sentence. So before the period ending the sentence, in parentheses, you would put the entire in-text citation. And then another option is if the author's name is used in a sentence, you can put it after the author's name. So, if you say, according to Johnson, so on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. If Johnson is the author, then you would just throw the year in parentheses after his name that's already used in the sentence. And so anywhere his name appears in that sentence is where you would put that year, because we never separate the author and the year. And then the last one is always tricky because people are like, no, that's it. Those are the 2 options because that's what you're told, right? End of sentence or after the author's name. However, there is a contingency if you're using a quote and that quote ends before the end of your sentence, which can happen. It's rare, but it can happen. The in-text citation follows the end of the quote. So immediately at the end of the quote, wherever the closing quotation is, you have the in-text citation information. Then you would have the rest of your sentence that you're writing, your wording, and then end with a period. And those are the 3 places it can go. Third question, using the following author and date of publication information, which in-text citation would be correct for the first time you're using this source? So we have authors Ferdinand, Marx, Hendricks, Schultz, and Lawley, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 5 authors here. We're using it for the first time. So which of these options, A through D, is it going to be? And first off, we're going to cross out the ones that we know are wrong. We know that if you have a parenthetical citation, you can't write out the word and. So that is why the first option is automatically wrong, that it has the word and written out. Also, Ferdinand 2008 is not enough information, so you can kick that one out. And so you're down to two options. Do you list all 5 of the author's names, or do you use that abbreviation where you list just the first author's last name and that et al for and everybody? Which one of those do you use? And so the answer here is that you list all of their names if you have 3 to 5 authors. The first time that you're using the source, you list all of the authors, and then in the future you would abbreviate it. So the answer there is B. We have number 4, using the following information, which one is the correct citation for using it the second time you're using or citing that source. So we have the same information, Ferdinand, Marx, Hendricks, Schultz, and Lawley. That's 5 authors published in 2008. And so we can get rid of the ones we know are wrong automatically because it has the written out and not enough information. And again, we're down to B or D. And the correct answer, let me cross those out actually instead of checking them. The correct answer is D, Ferdinand et al., because it's the second time or after that you're using this source. You use just the first author's last name and the abbreviation because APA likes to keep things short and moving quickly. And then number 5, using the following author and date information. This is a different source that you're using for the first time, which is the correct answer, A through D. And this time we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 authors published in 2010. And so we can do process of elimination again. So this one is not correct because it has the and written out. This one is not correct, doesn't have enough information. And it's down between, do you list all of the authors or just the last or first author's last name? And the correct answer is D, because if you have 6 or more authors, you immediately abbreviate it to just the first author's last name and et al. Moving on to question number 6. What do you put in the date of publication spot if there is no date of publication listed? And so this happens quite frequently with websites. It never happens with books, and it is very rare for it to happen with an actual published article, but websites happens all the time. So what do you put in there? Just for right now, let's say we have Ferdinand again publishing something, and he's publishing something we don't know when. It's not listed on, for example, a web page when it was published or when it was last edited. So what we would put is his name, comma, and then N period, D period, make sure that it's lowercase. So lowercase n, lowercase d for no date. So just a simple abbreviation for no date. Number 7, true or false, can you use anonymous in the author position if you don't know the author's name? So you might be wondering, what do I mean? So let me give you an example. Can you do that? Can you say this is by anonymous 2020 just because you don't know the author's name? And that is false. So you can't do this in APA. The only time you could possibly use anonymous as the author's name is if that is what the author has signed their publication as. So for example, with poems, that's quite frequent that somebody will write a poem and then sign it anonymous. That would be one time when you could use it, but it's very rare. Moving on to number 8, what would you put in the author position if there is no author, but an organization made or published the source? And so this happens all the time, again, on websites that particularly nonprofit organizations or government groups put out. And if it is a nonprofit organization or a government entity, you can put something else in that position than the person, because we don't know who the person publishing it is. and not use the title. And that is, again, only if it's nonprofit and only if it's a government entity. You can't do it, for example, for Target or, Walmart or something like that, where it's a for-profit business. It's only for those nonprofit or government entity groups. So for example, we could do the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And let's say they published something in 2021. You would put their name and then the year that they were published, if we know that. And if you plan to use that source more than once in your paper, which happens frequently, doesn't have to happen with all sources, but most sources get used multiple times, you would also include the abbreviation for that group name, which is usually an acronym. In this case, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are probably more well known by their acronym CDC. And that's what you would put. And the next question is asking, okay, so there's no author and it's not put out by an organization that's nonprofit or a government entity. What do you do? And the last ditch effort is to put a title in there. And usually it's going to be a short publication that has, like an article, for example, or a web page, not a book. The reason behind that is if people write a book, usually they want some kind of credit, right? Either for the person or the organization. But for websites, happens all the time. There's no person, not put out by a nonprofit group or government group. So what do? You would take the title and put it in the author position. And if it's a short work, put it in quotation marks. So I have here the end of the world in quotation marks. And that would be, for example, a web page title. And if it were a long published work, you would put it in italics, which is pretty rare. Moving on to number 10, when do you have to include a page number? So you can always include a page number if you want. There's nothing saying that you can't always just include a page number that something is from. However, it gets to be a lot of work, extra work. So when is the bare minimum that you absolutely have to use a page number? And that is when you quote. So when you quote something and it's a written source, you have to provide the page number. And if you're paraphrasing, it's highly recommended that you include the page number, but not required. And then the next question, okay, so I need a page number because I'm quoting. What if there are no page numbers? So again, our very frequent problem child is the internet, and you have these web pages that don't have an author, they don't have a date of publication or last edited, and they don't have page numbers. What do? So in this case, you would put the paragraph number down, and I'm going to show you a quick example of that here. So I have pulled up a publication by the Mayo Clinic, and they have good information. A lot of it is for the general population, so it's not really experts writing to experts, but experts writing to a general audience. So it may or may not be useful if you're doing research on a topic. But if you choose to include something from it, you'll notice, there's no page numbers here, right? So what do? And what you would do is say, okay, I want to use information or quote from this paragraph, and I want to include the location of it. Remember, you have to if you're quoting, otherwise it's optional. What you would do is you would say, okay, this is paragraph number 1, this is paragraph number 2, this is paragraph number 3. And so if I'm using wording from this paragraph, I'm going to say it comes from paragraph number 3. And because it's becoming more and more popular, just an FYI, if there's a bullet point list, include the bullet point list with the sentences that introduce it. It's called a list lead-in. And so this would all be considered one paragraph. You wouldn't have a separate paragraph for each bullet point. So back to our example here, we're looking at using information or wording from paragraph number 3, and we are going to include an in-text citation with that information. So the answer is we need a paragraph number, and as an example here, we're putting down this was written by the Mayo Clinic. It's a nonprofit organization. I can say that they are the ones putting it out there because they don't put an author down. They do at the bottom indicate when it was last updated, which was in 2021, and then we're taking from paragraph number 3. So you do PARA period and then the paragraph number. Number 12, where in the paragraph do you cite the source? So where do I have to put this, right? And there's only one correct answer here, so we can do this process of elimination. Do you only include the citation when you quote? No. You always include a citation when you quote, but that's not the only time that you do it. Do you throw it in at the beginning of a paragraph just because, hey, it's the beginning of the paragraph? No. And do you throw it in at the end of a paragraph, hey, just because it's the end of the paragraph? No. So this becomes really important when you start using multiple sources in your paragraphs, which you should do at the college level, because multiple sources are better than one. They build on each other, makes the information more trustworthy. So putting it at the beginning or the end won't help because we don't know what's coming from which source. And so what you need to do is A, you put the in-text citation in the sentence where you first start using the source in that paragraph and every time that you quote. And then number 13 here, this is a select all, so what are the correct answers here? And there's multiple of them. Once you have cited your source in your paragraph, so for example, let's stick with our Mayo Clinic example. We've used paragraph 3 and we cited it in our paragraph. You shouldn't cite it again until what happens? So if you start a new paragraph, do you need to, and you've used your source again, do you need to cite it? Yes. If you use a quote from that source, do you need to cite it? Yes. Every single quote needs a citation. You use the source in a new sentence. So let's say you have one sentence from the Mayo Clinic, another sentence paraphrasing the Mayo Clinic, another sentence summarizing from the Mayo Clinic. Do you need to put an in-text citation in each of those sentences? And the answer is no. If they're next to each other and you've cited the one at the beginning that's first starting to use the source and you're not quoting in any of the following ones, then you don't do that. That actually leads to over-citation, where people will have a citation in every single sentence, even though it's not needed. And then the last one, if you change from your first source, source A, to a different source, source B, and then you're changing back to source A, do you need to include a citation for source A? And the answer is yes. So when you start a new paragraph and you're using your source, gotta cite it. When you quote, whenever, every time, you have to use a citation. When you change from source A to B and back to source A, you have to cite source A again. All right, so feel free to look through those answers, and if you did the exercise along with, see how many of those that you got correct.